FPL is back, and it's back with some major changes from new positions, new chips, new strategies, new transfers. We're going to go through all the changes today and how they're going to affect you and your teams. Okay, so we're going to start with the position changes and get them out of the way quite quickly. Havertz is now a forward, not a midfielder. That's an interesting one. And Nkunku's now a midfielder, not a forward. Richarlison's now a forward, not a midfielder. Timo Werner's now a midfielder, not a forward. Semenyo at Bournemouth is now a midfielder, not a forward. Maatsen from Villa, who was on loan at Dortmund last season, is now a defender, not a midfielder. So there's a few interesting changes there, and they could affect how you build your team. I think Kai Havertz is now the most interesting one for me because he's now a forward at 8 million. And if you don't know, Havertz outscored Saka in the last half of the season. Now, if Arsenal don't sign a striker in the summer transfer window, Havertz could be a great option to back against Saka. I think there's still a few question marks with him, but it's the same with any Arsenal attacker really, bar Saka. You've got Martinelli, who could lose minutes to Trossard. You've got Havertz, who could lose minutes to Jesus. But if you're willing to take a risk, his underlying stats are good and it could provide great value. Now, another player that a lot of people are looking at is Nkunku, and that's because he's only 6.5 million, and he could be a great enabler if you're willing to back against Parma. The only question marks you have with Nkunku is, will he be able to stay fit for the entire season? That remains to be seen. If he does come into form, he's going to be a player that a lot of people look at. A quick note on the others. Maatsen on loan at Dortmund last season could be a great option if he breaks his way into the Villa team. We've got Semenyo at Bournemouth, who's only 5.5 million. He's a nailed-on starter. If Bournemouth have a good season like they did last season, he could be a great option. I really don't think a lot of people are going to be looking at Werner or Richarlison for the Game Week 1 teams, especially when you've got Brennan Johnson at 6.5 million, who looks a bit more assured for minutes. There's also other options, Son, Maddison. You'd probably want those over those. Okay, so the next change, which is the biggest in my opinion, is that you'll now be able to bank up to 5 free transfers instead of 2 this season. Now, I think this will affect different FPL managers in different ways. I know people last season who just completely forgot about their team for a few weeks and it completely set them back. I imagine when they go into their FPL account, they just see a lot of red and orange from players injured or suspended. I think for those more casual players, it's absolutely perfect because it allows people to catch up, and ultimately, I think that's probably better. I think on the whole, it's going to make FPL more competitive this year because you're going to get a lot more people with lots of different strategies. People will be able to recover points quicker because they'll be able to make the transfers to get the best players in. I think there is an argument that it does dumb the game down a little bit, but you can also look on the flip side and that it's going to create more strategies and it's going to bring a bigger depth to the game. So you could argue that it's good for more patient managers. It's also good for the risk takers as well, because if you take that 1 week punt and it doesn't go well, you might feel like you can recover those points later down the line because you'll have more transfers. And while it is a massive change in my opinion, it's not that big because you're still going to get the same amount of transfers at the end of the day. You're still going to get 1 transfer a week. There's 38 game weeks. You might just need to be aware of the fixture swings because you might be able to target smaller blocks of fixtures rather than a big block of fixtures like you would on a wildcard. And talking of wildcards, another transfer change that's being made this season is that your transfers will carry over after you play a chip. So whether you're wildcarding, free hitting, or using the mystery chip, which we'll come on to in a second, you're still going to be able to have those transfers that you banked prior to that. Now, how this will affect teams, it remains to be seen, but I think it will give you the opportunity to rectify any mistakes you make on your wildcards. It was always quite annoying when you'd play your 3 hit and then you still have 2 free transfers before and you sort of didn't really know where to tweak your team. In the past, a lot of people would have made those transfers and potentially get a player that's worse for the prior game week. But now, because you can carry those transfers over, you then don't have to suffer as much the game before the free hit, for instance. Again, it's another change that I think will simplify the game for some managers, but complicate it for others because there's going to be more strategy, there's going to be more people using their transfers wisely and planning ahead. So I think it's just going to make FPL again more competitive this season. Now, another change that a lot of people might be noticing in pre-season is that the players are a bit spenny. Haaland's 15 million, Palmer's gone up to 10.5 million, Saka's gone up, Foden's gone up. Last season there was a lot of good options in that 5 to 6.5 million range, whereas now you're looking at players in the 7.5 to 10.5 range. It's a big jump up, and I think it's going to create a lot more variation in people's teams. It's definitely going to make things interesting this season. I think you might even look at Haaland as a differential this year, which sounds crazy considering he's got 35, 25 goals in the last 2 seasons. But he's gone up to 15 million. I think it's quite strange because he didn't have as good a season last season, but he's still gone up in price. I think a lot of people will be looking at a £15 million price tag and just think, could I strengthen my squad elsewhere? I think it is really, really tough to build a good team with Haaland in. And if you do build a team with Haaland in, a lot of people are going to have that same team because you're limited to your options because there's not enough budget. I think at the end of the day, it's a good change because they're trying to create variation. I hate looking at template teams. People don't take risks. They just play safe. They captain Haaland every week. I think this is going to create a lot more excitement in your mini leagues, and I think it's a good change. It might affect the way that you build your team in game week 1. You might want to save 0.5 or even $1 million in the bank because you don't really know who's going to start performing well. If you need to make changes early on in the season, you're going to need some budget potentially to go up to those more expensive players. Okay, so the final change is something that we don't really have a lot of information on yet. There will be a new mystery chip that will come into play in the second half of the season. Right now, all we could do is speculate what that could be. A lot of people said it might be all-out attack, which is where you could change your formation to play 2 defenders and just go for attackers. Maybe this is what they were doing with FPL Challenge, trying to test what chips people would like to see. But I think at the end of the day, I'd say don't worry about it because we do not know what that chip's going to be. There's no point worrying about it. It's going to be announced. You're going to have a lot of time to prepare for whatever it could be. One thing that could be said is that a lot of people like to save their chips to later on in the season. If you throw another chip into the mix, it might mean you need to use 1 or 2 chips earlier on in the season, which is going to be outside of double game weeks, which is going to make things interesting. Aside from that, there's not a lot else you can really say about it. You don't know what it's going to be. They're going to announce it with some time to spare. Don't worry about it until it gets announced. Well, I think that pretty much covers it. So that's my thoughts on the new changes. What are your thoughts? I quite like them. When I went over my season history, I took 18 hits last season, 18 lots of -4 points, which really would have hurt my rank. So I'm hoping that these changes, particularly the transfers, will stop that. Maybe it'll make me more of a patient manager. I just like to be a bit impulsive and take risks, and I hope I can do the same again this season. But as always, I'm still going to follow the stats. Let me know in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It's only a couple of weeks to go to the start of the season, so it's time to get excited. Bring on FPL 24-25.